So, you should register the show us your project to Camille. Huh? And Camille will ask, do you have show your project, show your business, whatever, to this guy. Okay? So we will start the session, the second session. First, that will be on Magritte, the meta modeling system, and then after we will have a presentation of virtual machine of the future. So enjoy.
Well, hi all. Welcome to Drying Madrid. For the people who don't know me, I'm Stefan. I'm Diego Lont. This is my colleague Stefan Herman. And we're both independent developers in the Netherlands. And I built some framework on top of Magritte for a client of mine, Q Software, and he allowed me to make part open source. And I thought I wanted to talk about something about it to you, and I decided I actually going to talk about how do I use Magritte property and to get my code clean, so without a lot of duplication, because I found at several points I ran into trouble that I had to define a lot of the same things at different places, and I thought that shouldn't be right, and I found solutions for that, and that's this presentation about. For the people who want to look at the code together with me, because I will show a few code snippets, you can download it here. At Smalltalkhub under my user, the project called QC Magritte, and simply load the configuration and you should be fine.
It works at best if you already have a C-side image, by the way, because otherwise you will be a bit behind.
It will of course load C-side and Magritte, so yeah. Who of you has used Magritte before? So, a small part. Then I will tell a bit more about Magritte than simply saying it is a framework on top of C-side. Magritte is a framework to describe your objects, and with this framework you can generate your user interface, and you can do so in C-side but also in Morphic. And it's also you can also use it to access your database, because well, it's actually simply a description of your object, saying this is a number, this is a boolean, and you can define validations and actually do quite a lot of things with it. It's very abstract, so it's I found it hard to start with. So there definitely should be a chapter in the book, and maybe if I have time, I will give it a try to make a good chapter about it. And so I really started by the examples. The Twitch boot example is a great starting place, but it, as I will tell you later in this presentation, it lacks a few things. And the hooks in Magritte are not always very obvious, so that makes it sometimes hard to really make clean code with it. So,
Okay, why do we want to use something like Magritte? What we want to do is describe the software we make in terms that our stakeholders can understand. That means that our domain model should be described in using terms that the stakeholder, the business user, understands. In my database I have dates. In the domain of the end user I might have a birth date, and I have much more specific things I can say about a date than my database or Smalltalk by default says about it. In that domain model we want to talk a language the language of the business user as much as possible, and then we can use content interfaces with that, adapt with that, to create a user interface for it, to validate things at different levels, do the validations in the database, do them for the user interface. That might be on the server, that might be on JavaScript client, and be able to move those objects where we want them. That's called hexagonal architecture. That's something that Coburn described pretty well. You can, if you Google it, you will find lots of information. And Magritte is something that can help us build something like this in Smalltalk.
Stefan, you speak really fast.
Thank you.
We want to know, you know?
So, as I said earlier, in this presentation I will focus on how you will be able to extend Magritte with as little duplication as possible, without having to write parallel hierarchies and without having to subclass everything. So, as I said, we will use the Bootstrap example because, well, let's face it, it looks very well, and it is, the idea behind it is really good. And but because the model is small, it has a few problems, so we made an improved version. No, not just that. So, first of all, one of the things you probably want first is custom renderer. By default, Magritte renders tables, and in HTML that yields pretty fast a good result. But when you really want to do some makeup, some layouting, then a table doesn't do it. So the next option is to, so the first thing you want to change is to make a div renderer that says, okay, I want to render my table in a div called such and so, have such a class, and then the control in another class, and maybe you want to make it specific for specific components, etc., etc. And the next option after a default renderer is to use custom components, and actually when you look at the Bootstrap example, then it uses both custom components and a custom renderer.
We'll show that.
We'll show that. Yeah, show it. So here, maybe we should first look at the web, or how it looks like. So the Bootstrap example actually has 3 options. You have a Magritte form, a Magritte report, and some pop-up, but we only focus on Magritte things, so these are the Magritte things. So first, the form. Actually, this is already done within the Magritte style, so you see here the components here are each Magritte components, and when you pop up the halos, you probably should see that it is, you see here the MA select list. That's a Magritte component within a form decoration that is custom for Twitter, and yeah, this is something we added to do our things. And then when you create a form, then it layouts it the way you want, and you can type your name, and then you can say save, and then it complains that 0 isn't the magic number you want. Oh, okay. He didn't want to show the error messages. And there's a report example as well, and this is a form as well. The last 3 options we added, but well, just generate a report, and then you see, okay, it's a nice report with nice layouting and such. with pages and, well, the way Magritte does it, but then with a decent layout. And when you look at the code, you can see that no, you don't want to start with the description build, that's true. You want to go to the package model, to the Bootstrap model.
Sorry, I want to do something else.
Because you
Cannot
cannot
read
read
it.
it.
The fonts
Okay. The fonts are not as you want them. Okay, so you want to go to the model. There you can see how the Magritte descriptions are. So one package below it. And yeah, just select an arbitrary one. And you can go to the Magritte description and select the description, and you can see, okay, it is tagged with the pragma. It's very important for Magritte, and I often forget it, and that's very tiresome because then you think I added that code and it doesn't work. But okay, and then you say, okay, what type is it? A single option in this case, and well, you can set several things. One among them is a label, an accessor. How do I retrieve and set the value? And well, actually here, oh, the component class is set. Okay, and here's the component class set, which says, okay, when I render this, then you should use this component. And I think I go further with the next slide. So, custom components, they're intended for displaying a field differently. And for instance, European date is something different than a US date. It's actually the same date, but when you look at it, it's yeah, you want to render it differently, and often also even the selection of how you select a date is different in different cultures. So.
and it's different for a birth date than from a date which is supposed to be in the future.
Yeah, you can have specific all other specific dates. And another thing is each domain type needs its own description. A birth date may be different, but this is actually only useful for different types. So because you need to make a component as well, and for each instance, you need to set the component type. So it's a bit tiresome. And the custom renderer is quite powerful and quite easy to use. It allows a different layout than a table. It does not allow for different components, and it has as drawback that it needs to be set for each domain object. Okay, you can set it in the root, but still. And it does not propagate. And I haven't found a solution for that yet. And what I mean with that is that you have a report saying, okay, I want to use this layout renderer, and then when I press the add button to add an instance in that report, then it uses again the old render. So a few of the problems can be solved by a description builder. A description builder we added is one of the things we added, and it helps with the problem that a lot of descriptions needs the same settings. For instance, custom components, you need to set it for each field, but you don't want to set it for each field, because you actually want for a certain type of field a certain type of component. So the description builder visits the entire description, and based on the description, it sets several properties. Maybe you should show the code as well. So when you look at the Twitter Bootstrap example, then we have in that example one package above a description builder. and we say, okay, for a Boolean description, just tag it. We want to set the component class to a Magritte checkbox component, which is actually, and when you and maybe just for the demo, can you comment out the Boolean description? Just the fourth. Yeah, it needs to return something, otherwise it's really funky. Just the fourth line, where it says component class. So save and then go back to the web, and then you see new session maybe. And you go and you see that all booleans are now rendered a bit odd. And you went over it quite fast. Can you go back? Here, you can see that the booleans are all now misaligned because they aren't rendered the way, as in the Twitter Bootstrap example. And as you go, as you see, because I use a builder, it's also for the form example in the same way, etc., etc. So it's all throughout my entire application. I have a single point now where I have that setting that I want that component for booleans. Okay, next slide. A second thing I would like to show you is multi-language, which is often a problem you want to have. And I introduced in the QC Magritte something to allow for multiple languages. And the default is the toString, or actually the read string of the key. So it allows, when you have decent keys, then you hardly notice anything about it. But you can add languages and you can add translations, and translation can then be exported. So when we go to back to the code, there's only one line you need to change to allow for multiple languages. Which is in the model, the second browser. Now this is, yeah, isn't it selected anymore? Wait, this isn't, no, the first browser. And, oh, it's the, yes, here, yeah. Comment out the description builder and comment in the description builders. Here you see I've set one description builder, and now I say, okay, I want to have multiple description builders because I want to do multiple things. I also want to add languages. And now when you do the same, then you see it's still the same, but just generate the report if you like. Just generate, well, maybe with an option, I don't know. But when we now go to the multi-language demo, and we don't have a current language, so we add a language, which says ESUG, I don't know, Dutch, well, why not? And then we set the current language, we need a new session for that, okay. You don't add a language every time, so some of the things that are not updated. So save, I want to have Dutch. And then I go to the translations. And as you can see, I here have a key, a string value, and a Dutch. So I want to change the name, because I want a name is not a Dutch thing. So just press tab. So edit the name. And say, okay, name is now. Say. Yeah. And maybe we should also translate, please enter your name then, till something Dutch. And the screen is a bit small, so it doesn't work really easy, but oh well. So now we go back to the Twitter Bootstrap demo. and generate a report.
Dutch people not polite.
You know that.
Wait, it should have changed name. Is it a different one? No. You did save the builders? No, I mean in the code that you have now 2 builders. Yeah, it's not yellow anymore, so I don't know. It should work. That's strange. Okay, something went wrong with my demo. Go back to the multi-language demo, please. We have current language, and all translation says that. Well, should I change something else? Well, just change key. That's maybe a better example. Yeah. So the demo should work, but I will find out what's wrong and we'll fix it on the net. But just, yeah, key. And now tab. And give another name for key. I don't know. Sleutel. And it still doesn't work. Because it should... Okay, something is wrong, and it did work before, but... Okay, I broke something, sorry. Back to the slides then. Whoops. It should be as easy as I just said, that you simply set the builder to multi-language builder, and then you can add a language, and you can simply, and you can actually do them in the web, which has that advantage that as the coders usually don't speak a lot of languages, so you can simply use someone who doesn't really know the code but knows what proper translations are. So, as I said, just with the description builder and it should work, but something broke. Okay, next. Ajax, that's also a thing that you would like, I think. Because, everything on the web is now dynamic, so the rendering, and actually it's quite easy to build in. You use a custom renderer, and in that renderer you simply you create the script and call the components to render in a different way, and which helps. But the real trouble will start when you want to update the values, when you really want to use it. For instance, a Memento doesn't apply domain rules. So when you say in your object that when you assign something to the first name, then your full name will be changed. But in your Memento, your full name will still be the copy of the full name of the original object, which isn't the full name as the full name should be. Also, the description isn't updated, so if you have a field that should only be visible in a certain state, then it doesn't appear magically. It's still the description is static. So we also introduced a different Memento with some extra properties. An Ajax Memento, and I think next slide. And as I said, Memento is a generic dictionary with no domain class. Setting one value doesn't affect another. So the domain validation actually doesn't take place in the Memento. It only takes place when you press the save button, and then it uses the description to validate the values in the Memento, so it doesn't ask the Memento to validate. So our solution is to introduce an Ajax Memento which allow for domain rules. Next, I think there was another slide. Yeah, so you have dynamic descriptions. Oh, those are, yeah, okay, they're the same chapter. Okay, demo on the web. The form demo, please. And we will show the simple object. And here you can see you have, just to say, show that it works. I can show a hidden field. I have made a history actually with the thing. So when you type a number and then press tab, then it adds to the history. And when you type a different number, then it adds to the history as well. So, and a simple copy is of course also possible. That's actually quite easy. The object wasn't saved. Okay. And well, okay, I just added some several fields. So maybe look at the code, how little code we need for it. The last browser, what used to be the last browser. Here you can see I have the description of the hidden field is simply the normal description. And I used an extra one, the description hidden field with double point, which adds the influence that says, well, you should hide on if the self-description bool is changed, then you should possibly hide, and you should the first parameter is the value of the other description, and you should hide when the value is not true, and the initial state should be set as well, because otherwise it will be.
But did you expand the description with icon 4 and hidden? Or this was part of Magritte now?
No, that is not, it's not part of Magritte, but I added it to Magritte so you can use it now. But okay, but then you need to use the Magritte. But yeah, and the same for influences. So when you look at the history, for instance, maybe to the string copy as first, because that's the most easy one. This is simply the yeah. So the next one, then you say, okay, I want an influence for description strings, and I want to simply copy the value, which is quite easy. And the history is maybe a bit more tricky, but if you look very good, it's not very much, because you can have a second parameter which has what the previous is, and you can have a third parameter, and then you get the third parameter as the entire memento, and then it's a bit harder to make clean code. But okay. Back to the slides. So we can hide fields, we have influences, and last thing I want to show is reports. As a user. Actually here, this is an extension I've made with Ajax. The user wants to be able to filter the contact dynamically, add and remove columns, and save settings to the profile. So I'm going to show that. I believe this also more. The Bootstrap, I added to the Bootstrap. So when you go to Magritte, the last three I've added for this demo. Just tag them, say you can edit them, and you want to show a column chooser, and when you now create, maybe with a few rows, I don't know, create. Now you have actually a double click, and you can simply, you can't edit it yet. Something is definitely not working. And when you add the translation, does that work? Oh, this does work. Okay, phew. Then you can see, okay, you can simply add and remove columns. You can put them in a different order. And the save button you need to implement yourself. There's a hook to save it in your user settings. And you also have the possibility to add custom columns, calculate columns, but in this example that's not really possible, because you need relationships, and only with relationships you can calculate things. For for instance, you can have, I don't know,
Summation. Sum of
you want a sum of some collection field in your object. Okay, I believe I'm almost at the end of my presentation now. Dynamic reports. As you saw, I've made dynamic reports. You need custom report renderer, and you have custom columns. Yeah, well, in the implementation I made, I've got user settings that allow each user to have their own preferences to what columns they've shown and in what order, and
the language they use.
and the language they use. So, and it actually also has queries. And in the application, I use the queries are the basis of all reports, and they can save them, and they can have even more advanced filtering there. And I would like to thank Friedrich Dominicus for allowing me to make his code open source. It's there now. It's on Smalltalkhub. You can all download it. It has a configuration that allows you to load it. And there's still some parts that are not quite crystalled out in the sense that it's clean code, but most of the parts you can use. Questions? I hope I didn't make you sleep.
What about, where is the data? Where is actually your data? It stays in the image?
Yes, it stays an image, but yeah, because the idea of the application I made was a Gemstone application, so it's going to be deployed on Gemstone, so the data stays an image. I've got some root object somewhere that has all the data. And for this demo, all the data is in the forms itself, which resets after you press new session.
Just to clarify on that, therefore, there are not Magritte methods that are, as it were, methods being read to generate this Magritte structure. Data, it's a Magritte model, I beg your pardon.
So it's a Magritte model, and
Yes.
in the production intended, it will be stored in Gemstone,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not Magritte code that you would read to see the creation of this model. Or is there Magritte code that you would see to see the creation of this model, so that would actually be storing the data in another way? How did your data get in there? Did it get in there by your pointing and clicking, as we saw?
Yes.
Or did it didn't get in there by your executing methods or running some process that looked for
True.
methods and executed?
True.
That's the point I was trying to be clear about.
But there is an import and export functionality also to export it to CSV file and to import it from CSV file, and we'll actually use that to read the languages, or the translations. So we don't have to translate everything again when we make a new image.
And there is, of course, the Magritte thing to create SQL code and write things to a database.
And also to JSON, so it's quite easy to have a JSON import or a JSON app export. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.